welcome to the 905er podcast. I'm Roland Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
Today we're welcoming back multi-award-winning journalist Lorraine Sommerfeld to the podcast. While for readers in Hamilton and Halton areas, Lorraine may be most loved for her long-running Motherlode column in the Hamilton Spectator, Lorraine is best known across Canada as an auto journalist who has worked for all of Canada's three big national newspapers over the past 2 decades, and she now writes for the National Post. But Lorraine is no stooge for the auto industry, nor is she someone who thinks all our problems will be solved by electric vehicles. She recently won an award for an article about the new dangers being brought to our roads by electric vehicles. Another article took on one of the most universally believed truisms of modern life, that the gas companies are gouging us more and more at the gas pump every day. Which leads us to the most profound question of all. How does an auto journalist who says Canadian gas is still cheap and that what Canada really needs is not better cars but fewer cars manage to survive at the National Post? Welcome, Lorraine Sommerfeld, back to the 905er podcast. Thanks for joining us again.
Hey, Joel, Roland, good to be here.
And recently award-winning auto journalist for the National Post, and you also write for the Spectator with the Motherlode column. But we thought we'd speak to you today about kind of developments in the auto industry, I guess, and also just the fun you have as an auto journalist who is not necessarily an uncritical ally, for want of a better word, of cars, and things like that. So, we just sort of dive in and tell us about how. You got into auto journalism like a long time ago. Now you've been doing it. How have your kind of opinions of the industry or your attitude towards cars changed over the years, would you say?
I think it's changing for everybody. Most parts of the industry are calling it mobility now. They're not even saying cars or automotive, because there has to be a global fundamental change in how we use our road networks, because right now it is car, especially in North America. Everything is predicated on the car. And we're understanding that that is deadly and wrong. And we can't keep going this way because everyone has a fundamental right to get around where they live and do that safely. So I'm becoming, as you said, more and more critical because the industry itself isn't addressing it, nor are politicians and road planners and everybody like that.
And you were just saying, before we came on, I was mentioning the article you wrote, which I think is the one you won the award for, which was about how, something, if you think electric vehicles are the answer, well, apart from anything else, they still use energy, and energy is an issue, but also they're a lot heavier than a conventional internal combustion engine. So, tell us a bit about that side of things.
One of the best lines I read the other day, and it's not mine, and I wish it was, somebody said, electric cars will not solve the world's problems. They will solve the automotive makers' problems, which is very true. If you picture congestion in our most congested areas, which is Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, if you replace all those cars with electric vehicles, you have just as many cars with one person in them. That's the problem. It's not what they're driving. Yes, that absolutely contributes to environmental damage, but that's not going to cause the congestion problems. They're not going to magically go away. And the other problem is what you mentioned that I've written about a couple times now is because people, North Americans especially, are addicted to these massive vehicles. They're just insanely big. The SUVs, the pickup trucks. Who needs a pickup truck? I'm sorry, unless you're a farmer or a construction person. I don't get it. But we all keep buying these huge vehicles for the most part. And the only way to move this market into electric is to make replicas of those great big vehicles, but they just happen to be electric. That Ford Lightning, it's an F-150. It weighs 7,000 pounds. Sorry, I can't do the metric. That electric Hummer is 9,000 pounds. So when you do the physics, if that comes in contact with a vulnerable road user, they're about 35% heavier than a vehicle that you believe looks to weigh that much. So even if it's the size of a Corolla, it's 35% heavier with a battery and an electric battery. So that is going to fundamentally change the way our, especially urban areas, are working. Yes, they have great brakes. They're still being driven by distracted drivers who speed and don't care. We have a big issue coming with this.
I mean, is people keep on talking about the on the horizon is the driverless car. I mean, is this the answer that's going to fix everything?
No, it's not coming. No. Everyone's like, oh, by Tuesday. Imagine how many things have to be in place to have automated vehicles. Every car has to talk to each other. It has to be absolutely bulletproof for how it performs on the road to protect a driver. It has to be speaking and interacting with the infrastructure, which, let's talk about infrastructure money, people. I mean, we can't even get enough chargers in place for electrics. So this whole dream of automated vehicles, that it can only work when the cost to the driver is that we're going to remove convenience and speed. Find me a driver that's going to put up with that. Most of them will not. Safety is the thing that is going to go by the wayside every single time.
Are we looking at a bit of like a chicken and egg problem on this one? Just because I'm thinking, here in the 905, we're basically car dependent. I mean, we've talked, our voices were hoarse about the need for public transit investments, but we're still like right now, everything is very car dependent. I mean, look at Mississauga, Brampton, and then up in the York region, everything is basically sprawl. You're meant to drive from your house to the grocery store to the mall to do your errands. And so right now let's just say, well, that's great, Lorraine, yeah, we should be safer and cars aren't going to solve anything, but I need a car. I need two cars. My wife needs one. My husband needs one. My spouse needs one. I guess that's the question. Like, people might say, yeah, it's great. We should have more, safer roads and fewer cars on the road. But how do we get there?
Well, to me, it's a two-pronged problem or solution. I also have a car. There's two here. And so I hear you. I've lived here my entire life, because the failure of successive governments, for decades and decades and decades, they've kicked the can down the road when it comes to transit and everything else. The other thing is people want the convenience, because we are based on sprawl. We were built poorly from the 40s on out because gas was free and land was cheap. And so that's how we get to here. I think when I see different countries, especially in Europe, who take their very crowded downtown cores with high density and they just take cars right out. You can't do that anymore. It's the best solution so people can walk and have access. So to me, start in the cores. Here in Burlington, I think on Brant Street from Caroline to Lakeshore, that should be car free. That couple blocks, it should be car free. Start in the tight cores, put your density in that they all talk about and everybody wants. So start there. At the same time, stop deferring transit projects. Stop pretending everyone who doesn't have a car is inferior because, frankly, they're saving more money. We have to make it more enticing and livable for people not to be beholden to having a car in the driveway. Cars are so expensive and they're deadly. So it's not one answer. It's a bunch of things, but most of it is starting to change mindsets and have people stop accepting death and pollution and pavement as the answer to everything. It's not. We have to change our thinking. Other places have done it. It's doable. It's absolutely doable, but it takes political will.
And just actually on that point of like how in Europe, like, I remember being a child in the 1980s. So I was 10 in 1980. Around that time was about the time that every significant town in Britain pedestrianised its town centre, its downtown. And sometimes it would just be a single street, and sometimes it would be a whole bunch of streets. But basically any town centre was pedestrianised 40 years ago. And that just kind of speaks to how incredibly behind we are. Now, I'm not claiming that Britain doesn't have all kinds of traffic problems, because it sure as hell does. Mm-hmm. But, I know that, say, picking a random example, Burlington, that there have been discussions about pedestrianising Brant Street. And the minute you start talking about it, there's all kinds of pushback. There's pushback from people in the BIA, and not necessarily saying the whole BIA, but certainly some of them. There's people who immediately, this is going to create gridlock, and how do we persuade people who, I'm always saying that people are just basically small c conservative. All of us, we all are. We don't like change. We like things to stay the way they are. How do we change people's minds when, even the kind of moderate levels of change that, say, the current Liberal federal government tries to introduce provoke massive reactions of just all-out hatred?
I think maybe when we're building, like I was about to say, people hate change, because you're absolutely right. They only change when it's more painful not to change. So I think as we're building new things, build it in right from the beginning, and then we're not changing back to something. So let's, at least going forward, stop making the same mistakes we've made for decades. That would be a start, I think. I don't want to say we have to wait for people to die out to get change, because that's terrible. I also think we've got a lot of people, as our population ages, they're going to not be able to drive anymore. Perhaps that will start changing some minds when they need to be able to get around and want to do so safely, when it's not an option for them anymore. And we're going to see that happening. Whoever, COVID doesn't take out, we're seeing shifts in that generation as well. And I've written the cognitive test. I've been to the ministry with 80-year-olds to see what it is. And it should scare you, some of the people driving out there. But I've also heard from people who can't get the keys out of their parents' hands or their grandparents' hands. Again, this is an absolute grenade of problems. And I don't know how to get all the different people on board around a table to try and do it. And way bigger heads than mine have tried. Like I'm on the outside, complaining about it a lot. But it really is going to take levels and levels and levels of people committed to making a better planet and to making a safer planet, protect our kids, our parents, ourselves. I don't know where it starts, but I don't see it happening in this country, in North America. The selfishness of drivers in North America is gobsmacking. It is astounding.
Well, I mean, we've talked about previously on the podcast about the shift that the Canadian auto industry is going through from an internal combustion engine to this electric engine, and this is supposed to be the big shift in our economy. It's going to provide jobs and whatnot. Like as much as we want to say we need to shift away from the car, like we've built a ton of stuff around the car, like our economy, our structures, like everything is built around. We need to drive, and we have it. And again, we kind of have this illusion of the freedom of the open road, right? You get in your car and you just hit the gas and go as far as the gas will tank of gas will take you. I'm just wondering, like, is there a common ground or a compromise that can be made to kind of satisfy everyone? Because there'll be people living in the rural parts that are of the province that are listening to you saying, "Yeah, good luck taking my car away from me, Lorraine. I need that to." That I just need that, just not only to go to work, but to feed my family and whatnot.
I absolutely agree. I think it's criminal that we don't have better choices. Our only choice is to get a car to drive somewhere. You've explained the sprawl, you explained errands and everything else. I'm in the same boat. I don't want to walk 9 blocks and bring home bags of stuff. I'm lazy. I'm privileged. But I think people should have the option to have better choices. A lot of people would take it. Running a car when you're almost broke, I've did it so long when my kids were little, it was brutal. It was one of the worst expenses I had. I couldn't afford a new one. I had to keep fixing an old one. I had no money. So that's not a great option for a lot of people, but they feel cornered, and they absolutely are cornered. The auto industry in Canada, especially Ontario, is huge. It is a main supplier of jobs. It's a big driver. The switch to electrics, we're being told, oh, we're just going to go dig in the far north. I wrote about this last year too. Oh, the politics involved around this are insane. To produce an electric car, they have about 30% fewer parts than an internal combustion engine, a regular one. Those jobs, those are the ones coming off the floor. We're going to need people working in mining, software development. Those are where the jobs are going to come in this industry. So anyone thinking that we're going to be firing up more and more lines to make batteries and to put into these cars, with the legislation just passed at Biden with the Inflationary Act in the States, they're just going to take all our battery components and make them in the States because they'll get subsidies they won't get here. The Canadian auto industry is facing down some very terrifying times to come. And I think you have to read past the headlines. Yes, we're a really, really rich mining country, very rich. But other countries are just kind of going to cherry pick a lot of that off and take it back home.
So basically, what you're like the argument that if I'm reading between the lines is that the assumption, like, we hear from Doug Ford, Premier, this is we're going to create all these good auto part jobs here in Ontario with the Ring of Fire project and whatnot. And what you're telling is basically, no, we're not. We're going to create mining jobs up in the north, ship all the raw materials down here to create batteries, but that's not necessarily going to fuel an auto manufacturing industry here in Ontario. Is that what I'm getting? Am I reading that right?
None of us have a crystal ball for this. Mm-hmm. What we do know is building electric vehicles is very different than building conventional vehicles. And that mining stuff, that Ring of Fire, is going to be the Liberals, they've known about it for years. They didn't know how to exploit it and what to do with it. We're going to have to adjust not just the auto industry, but the indigenous groups that own that land. And the impact of blowing up the carbon bog that's up there is just going to be rattling. I mean, it's a thing. It's going to happen. You can't have that rich of a deposit and not have humans exploit it. So it's going to happen. I just think it's going to be very difficult to see where these jobs are going to spit off. Traditionally, we've always been able to say this many lines in Oshawa, this many in Woodstock. Like we know, what's going to be built here. The hybrids move in for, Pacifica. So we've been able to see where the new builds are going to come from. Right now, with legislation in the States, we can't guarantee where the build is going to be happening. And again, fewer parts, less time to assemble these vehicles. We have a huge parts industry. The spinoff from the industry has always been really, really big, but there's a lot of questions. They don't need as much maintenance. There's no transmission. So we're going to see a shift in repair. I don't know enough to know where it's going to end up. I just think we have to question when we think of the auto industry providing jobs. I think we're thinking about people on the line who can, go to college or high school and then get a really good paying job that's union and go ahead. I don't know that those are going to be the kind of jobs that are going to be saved or brought in. In fact, I know they're not. They're just not. They can't be. It's going to be very, very high-tech stuff and in different sectors. And I think we can't fool ourselves with what traditionally we're imagining the auto industry to be providing jobs, in those sectors.
And I guess the not the $1 million, the quadruple billion-dollar question is do we want to be tying our horse to a wagon that is still inherently an energy problem industry? Say, well, we're going to turn Magna from something that creates sprockets, as I understand it, bits and pieces, into electric bits and pieces. Well, like you say, there's fewer bits and pieces in an electric engine and electric cars. They wear out less often. They the whole there's that. But would we be better just sort of cutting our losses and saying, well, Canada doesn't want to be part of this next generation of cars because we need to be getting away from cars full stop?
Oh, we can't say that. It's too big an industry. Like we can't lose the engine, so to speak, that it is. But I think every single time you talk about electric vehicles, somebody will come in and say, what about what it costs to produce them and what's the environmental impact? And then someone else will say, oh, by year, pick a number, 5, 6, 7, it all washes. And after that, it's clean sailing. Or, what about the cost of making the electricity to charge that battery? So everyone can pick their boogeyman and come at it. And again, I don't know enough about all these different sectors to tell you which one makes the most sense. We've always known that extracting these ores and minerals, especially in geopolitical hot spots around the world, has always been, it's like diamonds, it's like oil. There is always going to be people who are going to die because I want to drive my hatchback. That's a fact, no matter whether it's an EV or a hybrid or an ICE. And it's really hard to know the media. I'm the media. The headlines can be incredibly misleading. And I wish I had better answers for where this industry needs to go. It's a huge industry. We're always going to have cars. We are geographically huge, and so is the States. It's going to happen. Talk about, high-speed trains. They talk about that. Most of us do not want to be inconvenienced, and that's where the change is going to be the most difficult, because my convenience tops everyone else's problems, and that's who we are.
I'll be honest. I'm not ready to give up my family car anytime soon. I have relatives that live on the east coast of Canada, and before gas was the price of a small country, we would drive out east, and I'm not going to lie, I like the drive. I love driving through Quebec, New Brunswick, out to Nova Scotia and PEI. It's a fantastic drive. I do suggest, if you have a chance, people go do it yourself. It's a great way to see the country.
It's amazing. That's great.
It is. And we have a beautiful country, and part of the joy is being able to get in your car and drive away. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I guess I'm thinking that, you're right. We're never going to get rid of the car. I can't see that happening. But this popped into my head as you were talking about the shift in the industry. And I think the problem is a bit of a lack of imagination on the part of our political leaders. Surprise, surprise. It's that it's that assumption of, okay, we're going to make electric cars, but we're still going to have lines at Ford and Oshawa, the Oakville and Oshawa plants, and up in Brampton at GM or at Chrysler. They just make electric cars. And what you're saying is, no, that's not the case. And I'm thinking, with every crisis, there is an opportunity, and that we're talking about a fundamental shift in the way that our economy operates. We're going from the idea of a manufacturing economy, of doing this line work of, the guy or the girl sitting on the line, putting the bolt in the door, putting the seat in the car and all that. Like, that will go the way of the dinosaur. Even that job, as automation takes hold, will go away. It'll be easier for a robot just to assemble the seat and the dashboard and the doors on and put the paint on and everything, as opposed to paying somebody to do it. In that shift, isn't there an opportunity there to kind of reinvent the Canadian city for the kind of the 21st century, that we get away from this idea of sprawl and buying a car and what, like, everybody could have a car, but maybe instead of 2 or 3 cars, everybody just has one car.
One would be brilliant. Smaller would be more brilliant. We started to go to compacts about 20 years ago. Gas was just too cheap. That's the only thing that moves the needle at all. But right now, if every single oversized pickup and SUV was replaced, I call it right sizing. Why can't we right size the vehicles and the houses we live in? Let's go there as well. Most people don't need. My boyfriend takes my hatchback surfing. He puts 3 boards in it. The thing swallows everything. We think everyone says, I feel safer because I feel I'm higher up. And the fact is, the people inside those SUVs, you've never been safer. They're absolutely right. The safety ratings are great. It's everyone around them that's getting destroyed. So it's at a cost of, we have to care about everyone else, not just ourselves. That's a hard sell when you got a family. When they say we're going to protect your family, okay, sign me up for that. Of course I want that. Only the cost is so high. And I've got to call them out today about Halloween tonight, because kids' deaths and injuries spike on Halloween night because of drivers. And it's always gotten worse. Now we've got these huge vehicles with all these blind spots. Manufacturers make them all big and high because consumers want them. Then they have to just load in sensors and cameras so that people can see around in their vehicle. They can't see. NHTSA in the States is now saying they want to mandate having front over sensors because people are running over their kids in the front. We've mandated backup cameras. Now they want to mandate front cameras because people can't see outside of where they're driving. How crazy are we? This is nuts. We're killing each other because we feel safer and entitled to have these massive vehicles that we don't even need. You don't need to drive around with your living room. If you need a bigger vehicle once a year to take grandma up north, go for it. Rent one. But it's a mindset.
Especially where, I moved to Hamilton a year ago and I don't currently own a car, and that was kind of an experiment. And there are certainly days when I wish I had a car and I could just jump in and drive. But they're not that many of them, actually. By and large, they're pretty few and far between. And Hamilton has, there's the Zip car, and there's what's something called Commune Auto, and you can rent a car for about 3 hours for about $35. Mm-hmm. And that's that. I mean, on a dollar for dollar basis, it works out so much cheaper. Now, I'm tooting my own trumpet there, but I'm not claiming that you don't lose a level of convenience, but you gain a whole lot of money. That's for sure. And I'm wondering if maybe if self-driving cars do happen, and like you, I'm kind of a lot more skeptical about whether that can actually happen. Like the last 1% they need to get to make a self-driving car to be as safe as a human is a really difficult percentage point to get to, is my understanding.
No, can I just butt in? Sorry, I don't want to be rude.
No.
If we took drivers are the cause of almost every crash, 99% of crashes. I don't call them accidents. You'll notice there's no such word. So actually removing the driver would make everything safer. Like it really would. And all the stuff is available for autonomous features, all the things, the collision control, the lane departure warnings, all the things we have already, that's all autonomous features, and they know it. But when you've got clowns, most of them are driving Teslas. Sorry, Tesla fanboys. When that's who wants to YouTube, so they're all over YouTube, and now they've opened up investigations because they hop in the back seat and it drives into a tree. None of these systems are that good yet. And they will tell you they almost are. Well, we've got 5 levels of autonomy that's defined by a global engineering thing. We're at level 2. The driver has to be prepared to take the steering wheel at all times. But people are testing it because that's what people do. And
asking someone to sit in a chair doing nothing for hours on end, but be just as aware as if they were driving, seems to me to be kind of asking for trouble. And
that's the human factor. And that's the problem we have. Because human beings are crazy, human beings are unpredictable, and if there's anything you want on the road, it's predictability. That's why I kind of harp away at people when I say, put your indicator on. They go, there's no cars around. I go, pedestrians need to know what you're doing. Cyclists need to know what you're doing. Other drivers need to know that you know what you're doing. Like if you're, a lane that's exiting, definitely put your indicator on anyway. I want to know that you know that lane is ending. Human beings are highly unpredictable, and that's the part we can't get around. They step off curbs. Yep. Everyone yells at pedestrians for having their face in their phone. You still don't get to kill them. You're ultimately in control of a moving weapon. You don't get to kill someone because they're stupid.
Well, certainly one of the actually, I think it was an episode we did. I think I was just shooting my mouth off on Twitter as happens. And it was something to do with the road system in Hamilton and the sort of just insane spate of deaths that happened in Hamilton earlier this year.
It's horrible.
And I attracted a bunch of kind of blame the pedestrian people, for want of it. I don't know what else to call them. That kind of
my best friends.
Well, we'll come on to that as well in a second. But that was the mentality, is like, if you're a pedestrian, you make a mistake, then the death sentence is totally justified, right? And it's like, seriously? Is that we don't...
I think that's kind of the human condition, though, is that whenever something goes wrong, we immediately find a reason why it couldn't have happened to us, because then that makes us feel safer or better. And so when something, if somebody gets stabbed at 3 a.m, well, I don't go out at 3 a.m, therefore I'm safe. Or if someone gets, anything like that, hit by a drunk at 1 a.m., well, I don't go to bars at 1 a.m. now, but I spent lots of years doing that. Mm-hmm. But I think we instinctively think of the reasons why it couldn't happen to us. And then we feel safe and we go on our way. And it's almost a defense mechanism, I think, to stay alive, because there's so much coming at us, in every which way. But blaming pedestrians and other road users, it's handy. And sometimes it might even be right, but the cost is too different. The cost is just too different. And I don't know. I think even the way we quantify, we'll say fatalities, we add up fatalities. They never say life-altering injuries. You never see that one highlighted. That's the one we should be talking about. Because if you hit 6 people, there was no fatalities. Tell me what happened to those 6 people that got hit on a sidewalk. Because guess what? their lives are forever changed. And it could be a broken hand. It could be a wheelchair for life. We don't advertise this right.
One thing I'll jump to your defense, Roland, on bad drivers in Hamilton, because every time I go to Hamilton, I get off the 403 onto Main Street. That thing is what, a 6-lane boulevard, just barreling through the middle of the city. And as soon as you get off the highway, you're like, okay, I need to switch over a few lanes. I need to get off like you go into the fast lane. As soon as you turn your blinker, somebody always speeds up right into your blind spot. Mm-hmm. 9 times out of 10, it's like, no, the blinker isn't a single, okay, I'm going to speed up and fill that void. It's make a room. I need to get over. Drives me nuts. That's my rant for the day.
Well, have you ever tried to get out of the HOV lanes? It's the same thing. People are so angry in the HOV lanes that they won't let you out.
Well, and the funny thing with the HOV lanes is you're driving and you say, okay, you need to get out of the HOV lane like 2 or 3 exits before the exit that you need to get to, because you need to get out and they need to jump across like 3 or 4 lanes of traffic to get to the exit, which is a little redundant. And
I mean, we've got a couple of minutes left, really, but I mean, you're an auto journalist. You write in the auto pages of national newspapers. I mean, you've worked for the Globe and Mail, you've worked for the Star, you've worked currently with the National Post. How, and those sections, I mean, they basically exist to sell cars, right? It's like the advertising that goes along with those articles is about selling the latest car, and how are you doing yourself out of a job, and how do your readers, how do the kind of readers who turn to the auto sections of the newspaper, or click to the auto pages of the newspaper these days, I guess, how do they react to you saying, hey, cars are a huge problem, right?
I think, I still have a job. It'd be nice to keep it for a while. I have protection, a little bit of an umbrella as a columnist, which, as you know, is different than, I'm not a journalist. But I think you need those voices. And anyone who writes contrary things, especially in the opposite side market, you're opening yourself up to that. And I understand that. The very first fan mail I ever got when I started writing Motherlode told me I was a terrible mother. The very first letter I got 20 years ago was, "You're a terrible mother." I thought, well, I'm done. So everyone's allowed to say what they want. That I would rather people were reading and being angry. That's fine. At least they're reading and considering there might be another side to this. I find what's interesting sometimes is I'll get differing opinions within a family, like members of the family will, contact me. So I don't think anyone should believe that, and including me, that their opinion is absolute, because it's not. There's different sides to this. And we're seeing fewer kids get their licenses. And I remember we were at 15 and a half, like just going, come on, I got it. The only way I'm going to get out of here. Kids have their phones. They talk the whole time. They have entire relationships online. And in 2 weeks, they're blowing up what takes us a year to blow up in grade 9 or 10. So it's a different approach to cars. And they also see the expense, and insurance is just insane and getting worse and worse. So I think generations, we do get changed that way. They understand why their parents have a car, but a lot of them are going, I'm at school, I'm living somewhere. They look at how much it costs to keep a car on the road. They're going, forget it. And again, depends on where you live. If you're rural, there's no transit, there's no option. You have to do that. I understand if your job requires it. So I'm not anti-car at all. I'm anti-big car if you don't need it. Yep, I'll die on that hill, because too many people are dying on that hill. So I will put my money where my mouth is on that one. If people get angry or upset with me, we need to change. It's not working. Death rates are going up. It's bad. Our streets are dangerous. So if what I'm saying is so wrong, what do they propose? That it keeps getting worse and we're okay with that? This Vision Zero nonsense that's been incorporated. Like Toronto, what a joke. Vision Zero. You know what? It's lip service. They keep reinventing it. We've had 3 incarnations, I think, in the past 10 years. They don't care unless you're going to get drivers to buy in and planners to buy in and politicians to buy in. There's no point in telling pedestrians, hey, we're going to make you safer. All you're doing is giving them a false sense of security and hope, and you're not delivering. We need buy-in from every sector to commit to wanting safer streets for drivers too. Like if you just hit a car a little bit, it's going to cost you a lot of money to fix it. So you don't want to do that. We know traffic circles are far, far safer for drivers. There's no head-ons. There's no making left turns. They're safer. They take up more land. People get confused. It's a change. We're not used to it. Well, you can't argue that you're way less likely to die in a traffic circle than at an intersection.
Oh, don't get me started. As an expat British person, you're singing from my song sheet there. Yeah, well, I think we're probably drawing to a close here. Thanks so much, Lorraine. I mean, I think, and as a concluding point, the fact that Vision Zero and climate emergency are two of the most used phrases by every municipal government in Ontario, simultaneously with being both subjects where they have no intention of really doing very much, the vast majority of the time, it just sums up so much of the kind of shameful behaviour of our municipalities. That every municipality said climate emergency. We've got a big emergency going on. Here's a budget, $0. Will that fix it? Unbelievable. But anyway. Thanks so much, Lorraine. Really appreciate speaking to you as always. And thanks very much.
Thanks, Roland. Thanks, Joel.
Bye. That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.